Hey, what's up, boys and girls? It's me, it's your old pal, the Original Gamer. How are ya? And what are we looking at today? We're looking at my latest pickup. This is the Sega Saturn. I purchased this last weekend, or this weekend that just passed, right? What's today? Today's like Wednesday. Okay. So I bought this on a Sunday, and I was kind of on the fence if I wanted to keep it because there were kind of two, I guess now, minor problems. First problem with the Saturn was where the power cable was. It was kind of missing a screw, and so this connection was a little bit wonky, a little kind of cocked from side to side, and it lost power. So I just stuck a screw in there, and I got both things tightened up, and it works. The second issue was, and there's a back cover that's missing from this, but what's inside here is actually, I can't work my finger backwards, but there's actually a little battery in here. It's like one of these little watch batteries. And that's what is like the battery backup to the storage. It has a little bit of internal storage for saving your games. This is what the console looks like. Sega Saturn. It was a CD-based system. Has an top open CD system. It has two front mounted joystick ports. These are slightly different connections from previous generation consoles. The connection kind of looks like a bloated HDMI cord. It's got that same kind of angled corners of an HDMI. And what I loved about the Sega Saturn was the actual controller itself. To me, this was console nirvana. This was the holy grail of game controllers because we had the 6-button layout, which is exactly what you need for Capcom fighters. And there was a lot of incredibly good Capcom fighters for the Sega Saturn that were flawless arcade ports. But you have your ABC buttons and your XYZ buttons. You also have two bumpers. And then you have your start button and then a pretty good D-pad, an 8-direction D-pad. So this was an improvement over the Sega Genesis controller. Still inspired by the Sega Genesis controller, but an improved version with the addition of the bumpers. They later also released an analog controller as well that was released with a game called Nights into Dreams. And so this analog controller gave you kind of a 360 thumbstick that you could really get responsive movement with. So great controller. And it's a great little system. The system came out in 1995. I'm going to go ahead and hook it up. System came out in 1995, and this system, and so you've got kind of like an S-video cable that plugs into the back, which gives you your red and white audio and your yellow video. You kind of like your component connections. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the power. And so you had basic AV cable. It came with a CD that was called the Sega CD Bootleg Sampler, which was basically 3 demo games and then a bunch of video clips of other games for the system. Released around 1995, this thing came out exactly the same time that the first Sony PlayStation came out. They were both basically brand new next-gen consoles that nobody had ever seen before. 32-bit system, full 3D graphics with texture mapping and all the things we've come accustomed to now were all brand new features in this system. So let's go ahead and power this thing up right now. And let's turn it on. And let's see what the Sega Saturn looks like. I just put a brand new battery in here, so you actually have to... wow, I need to adjust that volume. That volume is very loud. So I had to change the battery because the battery that was with it was dead and was not allowing me to remember my save games by any means. So whatever. I'm not going to worry about setting the date and time right now. That's a little bit loud though, I'm going to tell you. So we're going to exit out of that. I'll change the time later. And this is what a Sega Saturn boot up system looks like. 1995 Sega. Woohoo! And so what we're looking at right now is the demo disc that came with it. The demo disc gave us 3 playable game demos. And I really got to figure out how to... lower this volume because it's killing me. I'm hoping I'm going to hear myself over the game. So here it is. This is the bootleg sampler. There were 3 playable games: World Series Baseball, Sega Rally Championship, and Clockwork Knight 2. And then there were a handful of video demos of the games where you could kind of see a video clip of a game in action. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. Let's take a look at World Series Baseball. There were some really great Sega sports titles. I got into hockey right? Growing up in Florida, we didn't have a lot of snow or ice, but right around 95, we got our first hockey team, which was the Florida Panthers. So I got into hockey, and I had a lot of good hockey games for my Saturn II that were actually really good games. So this game came out at a time when the cutscenes were still a little bit better than the games themselves. Right around the time of the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation and even early PC games of the 90s. We were in a time when the cutscenes were better than the games themselves. And so and because this was a CD-ROM based system, there was lots of video clips, full motion video stuff. Because this is a demo, there's only one thing I can do. I can do a home run challenge. And so I am going to go ahead and...
Dad.
Hello, Madison. How are you?
Bye.
You leaving?
Yeah.
Love you.
Bye. Love
Bye.
you.
I'm just going to pick a team here. And I think the only thing I can do is try to hit some home runs. But this is a pretty cool sports game, right? So, whatever. I don't know who that guy is, but we'll pick him. Not a big baseball knowledgeable person. And by the way, I'm playing this live, right? So this is live analog capture of the game system. And this was our first taste of real 3D graphics on home consoles, which you'll see here in a minute. Texture mapped, polygon based 3D graphics. And you can see it's kind of scrolling
Now
through.
batting, John Flaherty.
John Flaherty. Strike one. I think I've got to hit 10 balls. And you can see the camera pan and zoom here. Nice features. I'm not sure if that counts as a home run. You're trying to hit home runs, so you have to hit them out of the park. This is like a little mini game within the game. Strike two. Is that a home run? Is it a home run?
Out of here.
It's a home run, right? So this is a home run challenge. You got to try to hit 10 home runs, basically hitting the ball out of the park. Wow. So you can adjust your positions. I'm not sure what all the buttons do. That looks like a foul almost. Foul ball. Yeah, that one went off to the side. But this is pretty impressive for 1995. Three-dimensional graphics, 32-bit system, 32-bit color. You know, so we were starting to come into our own with our console games. This came after the Sega Sega Genesis. All right, I think I've had enough of this, though. Let's go ahead and reset it. I've had enough of that one. Let's take a look at this. So this came after the Sega Genesis, right? So the Sega Genesis had a couple of evolutionary steps. Sega Genesis added the Sega CD, which added a CD-ROM add-on to it, which allowed for larger games. But it still did not improve the color depth of the graphical capabilities too much. So Sega CD still was only 64 colors, which was a little bit dated for the later 90s. Sega added a bolt-on thing that you can plug into the top of your Genesis that was called the 32X. And the 32X would give you 32-bit colors and graphics and had slightly better games, but there was only maybe a couple dozen games ever made for that. I believe the 32X became the Saturn. I'm pretty sure they recycled some of that technology and just added onto it to make the Saturn. This was a great thing. Really good driving games for the Saturn, right? So the Sega Rally was a great little driver, especially if I don't think I have too many cars I can choose from. And it was just a great little driving game. There were a lot of great driving games for the Saturn, Daytona USA being one of my favorite ones ported from the arcade. So we'll take a quick look at this, and then I'll also show you Clockwork Knight, which is a pretty cool platformer that was released, you know, a year or two before they had ever make a Sonic title for this. I don't know. Okay, B is gas. So, you know, Sonic the Hedgehog became their big title for the Genesis. Sonic became their mascot, but it took a couple years before they ever came up with Sonic and had that mascot. When they released the Saturn, there really wasn't a mascot, so to speak. There wasn't a big launch title or launch character or anything like that. It actually took a couple years later before they would release a Sonic 3D Blast for the Saturn, which is a really good version of Sonic that I like. It's like one of my top 3 Sonic versions. But it didn't come out right away. So, but what they did have was a lot of really good sports games, a lot of good driving games. And one of my favorite titles was actually a flying game called Panzer Dragon. which I'll show you a video clip of. But what I mean, these graphics actually look, I'm going to be honest, they actually look fairly bad by today's standards for 3D graphics. But this was the first time we saw anything like this. This system was comparable to the first PlayStation, what we'd now call PlayStation 1. They were released right around the same time, had similar capabilities as far as the graphics. There were lots of different console wars going on with this. You know, you had your different camps, you had your fanboys. So you had your Sony fanboys and you had your Sega fanboys. This became the underdog console. For whatever reason, it didn't get the kind of the public recognition it deserved. It's kind of like the Sega Master System. Sega Master System was a great console that I don't think many people knew about. Nintendo become much more popular, so I don't know if it has to do with marketing and how much money they spend on advertising, or for whatever just weird twists of fate and how history made certain choices and how some things evolved and some things didn't. But yeah, I just lost out. So let me show you the last demo in here. But I loved the Sega Saturn. I've been a Sega guy. You know, I've had lots of Sega systems. I had the Genesis. I had lots of add-ons for the Genesis. I had the Saturn. I didn't get the Dreamcast because the Dreamcast seemed a little bit too expensive at the time it came out. And then unfortunately the Dreamcast was the last console Sega would ever make. This is a pretty cool platformer. This one was called Clockwork Knight. This is actually the second version of this. And it's kind of this quasi 3D platformer that looked very cool, very stylistically different for its time. It does remind me of some of the titles that were released on the Super Nintendo, especially like a game like Donkey Kong Country, where they kind of took this pseudo 3D model and put it into like a 2D world. So the way these things look, it kind of reminds me of like some of the Super Nintendo games like Donkey Kong Country that created these kind of 3D looking models. The difference here is this is an actual true 3D system, but I think the models are still kind of like 2D spritey type models based on a 3D image. But it's just very cool visual. So I can jump and I can use my key as both a weapon and as a tool. So there's bad guys. You are a Clockwork Knight, and this also reminds me of a cool Sega Genesis game that was one of the levels on Mickey Mouse Castles of Illusion was going through a bedroom and dealing with toy soldiers and things like that. But I love the multi-plane kind of 3D background scrolling. Very cool effect. And this thing here is actually going to turn a corner right now. You basically have to reach the finish line before you run out of time. And there are a bunch of bonus things you can do along the way for extra points and credit without falling in a hole like that. So we'll try it again. But yeah, this was pretty state-of-the-art, crazy, next-gen, bleeding-edge type of console technology. We had literally never seen anything like this in the home before, you know? So it was pretty cool. It's pretty high tech. I was a big fan of all the fighting games. I loved all the Capcom fighters. I loved all the Virtua fighters, which were kind of the 3D ones. Virtua Cop with the pistols was a really cool game. You know, all the good Sega titles from the arcade got ported to this. All the more fancier ones like the Daytona USA's and things like that. So this is an area here where you can actually use your key to crank this thing up here and make a staircase and get up higher. This staircase doesn't stay open very long. You got to get up here, and this is kind of like a bonus area that you can jump up and get more junk, right? More pick-me-ups if you make it to the top without getting beat up by bad guys. But cool little platformer, cool little console. Now, one of the things that I was really hoping when I bought this was I was hoping I was going to be able to go online, download all the CD images, and just burn CDs and run all the games. Right now, I'm having an issue with that. Okay, this is some hidden stuff. Okay, what is this guy here doing? Oh, jumping into a box. Oh, I just like unlocked a bonus level or something, huh? Or like maybe a teleporter. Maybe I just like fast traveled to a new area in the game. Okay, so what's happening here is when you get hit, you become invisible for a second. I have to let this guy come up. Okay. He takes many hits. Okay, gotcha, sucker. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with these eggs. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that ball. Do I duck the balls here? Do I avoid the disco balls? Cool game, though. Very cool. Very cool multi-layer scrolling 3D-ish platformer with an interesting character. The Clockwork Knight character. Cool music. I think I had the first version of this game because I saw it on a demo and I liked it. I think I ended up buying one of these. I had a pretty impressive Saturn collection when I had my Saturn. I had multiple controllers. I had the analog controller. I had a steering wheel. I had the arcade fighting stick that was, you know, much more, a rugged, real stick with the ball on the end and the 6 buttons. I had the arcade fighting stick. I had all kinds of stuff. So I had a ton of games, a ton of accessories. I'm embarrassed to say I probably dumped over $1,000 into Saturn stuff at the time because the stuff wasn't cheap. And now, thanks to eBay, I'll slowly but surely try to gain back some of the accessories. I'm not going to go crazy and try to buy every game title. I'll probably end up maybe getting a half a dozen or so games that I really enjoyed playing. The cool thing is I can play this system live. So I am showing you this. I'm recording this and capturing this as a live playback through analog capture. So the game looks pretty much like what it would have looked like on a television. This is not emulated. This is a real console. So I'm looking forward to having some titles to play in this console. I've actually ordered a couple of like 3-in-1 game packs off of eBay. So I'll have a few games to play in a couple of days. Okay, here's okay, I don't know what the stopwatches do. I guess they give me time. Okay, yeah, I guess that added time. You only have so much time before you have to reach the finish line. Okay, I have no more lives. I have 0 lives. So let's just see if we can reach the finish line here and end this level. And we'll end this preview. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Sega Saturn. I really enjoyed this system. This system was allowing us to play games at home that were just never previously possible. The PC was not able at the time to really produce good quality 3D games like this. It took till the late 90s before the PC got into the 3D gaming action. So it was around 99 when the Voodoo graphics card came out and the PC was able to do halfway decent things. Can I get through there? I don't know. I guess I'd have to let myself down. There's actually a bonus area in here, right? So, and I lost that key. Okay. Okay, that is that. Okay, I got 4.5 minutes left to make the finish line without dying. Okay, so here's a little bit of parkour here. Cool little game. Yeah, so this system really let us play games at home that you could only get in one of two places, on this console or in the arcade. So there was a lot of great 3D titles coming out at this time that all had the word Virtua in front of them. So there was Virtua Fighter, there was Virtua Cop, there was Virtua Tennis. So when 3D became the new thing in the arcade, it was a pretty hot commodity. And so Sega had a lot of different Virtua titles, and you could play pretty much all of those pretty faithfully reproduced on this console. So yeah, here's more time. More time. No falling damage. I have to make sure I don't fall in that hole there. I like walking through these little portals here. I have no idea what the purpose of these eggs are. But I am totally digging this Sega Genesis. I have a bid on eBay right now for the analog controller that comes with a game called Clockwork Knight, which was... Okay, so now I have to try to jump and land in the middle. I landed on the O in Clockwork, so I got a little bonus thing there. So that was like a little bonus doohickey you got to do when you... Kind of like in Super Mario, you have to jump up and hit the flag for a certain number of points. Kind of a deal like that, right? So that was Clockwork Knight 2, one of the playable demos on this Sega Bootleg Sampler. And now the game's over, so you don't get a lot of time to play it. They're kind of very limited playable demos. And then there's a ton of video clips that you got to see on here. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what I have just shown you is a preview of the Sega Saturn video game console from 1995. Incredible system. First time we had full 3D gaming in the home. Came out at the same time as the Sony PlayStation, so they were basically... These were both wild cards. Nobody was going to be able to predict initially which console would take off and which console would be the dominant. I think history has now proven that Sony is that company. But when Sony first released the PlayStation, Sony had never made anything entertaining before. Now, these are all little video samples, right? This is a game called Bug, another pretty cool console. You know, so they took the platforming and really, you know, made it a little bit more 3D. With the capabilities of this system. So lots of cool platform games. And what the Saturn was actually, not only was it really good at making 3D titles, but it was incredibly good at 2D side scrollers. There were a ton of really good 2D things because the hardware in here had so many layers of scrolling backgrounds that it could support, and so many layers of sprites and the really good detailed sprites. So this game has an underground cult following of people who just loved all the 2D platformers and 2D fighters. Every major Capcom game was released for here. So all of your like Street Fighter Alphas and Street Fighter Alpha 2, all your major Mortal Kombats were on here. All like Marvel superheroes versus the X-Men fighters. All these major AAA Capcom fighting titles were all flawlessly ported to this system. This system was great for 2D stuff. This is a little video clip of Virtua Fighter. This actually had the light pistols where you could aim and shoot. And because it was 3D, they were kind of tying that in with virtual reality. So everything was called Virtua. So Virtua Fighter, Virtua Cop. Here there was Virtua Tennis. So anything, and there was a Virtua Racer, you know. So the fact that we had this whole 3D perspective, this was a brand new thing introduced to both arcades and home systems. So Sega really, you know, capitalized on this. And these were all things you could play in the arcade that they ported to the home. So for me, there was a huge appeal because I was playing these things in the arcade, and I really enjoyed having them at home. It was a really impressive thing to be able to show people that you could play this thing at home that looked literally as good as it did in the arcade, because the home computers were not able to do that just yet. So cool. I'm gonna stop talking now, but I had fun talking about one of my favorite consoles. I've got many favorite consoles, but most of them are made by Sega, and this was one of them, the Sega Saturn. So stay tuned. As I get more things from eBay, I'll be showing off some more gameplay demos. Until then, I'll see y'all later. Original Gamer StevieStrow. Don't forget to leave a like, to subscribe, to throw out a comment, and to share. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out, bye bye, and may the force be with you.